Hey Paws of Prey pals! So lately I've been finding it difficult to answer all of my DMs and YouTube comments, and that makes me feel pretty bad. So I thought I would start doing Q&A videos more often so I can answer some of your questions. Let's get into it. Question 1. How do you deal with feeling overwhelmed with raw feeding? So this took a lot of trial and error. When I first started feeding Matsu as a puppy, I was definitely overwhelmed, especially when I made his first few days of meals. Prepping took a long time and I was incredibly inefficient with how I portioned out meats and prepped the containers, so I had to figure out a way to make things easier. One way that I did this was to buy in bulk and prep out 3 to 4 weeks worth of meals at a time. Sure, it took me a little longer, but I noticed that I didn't have that doom feeling anymore when it came closer to meal prep time. Cutting everything up ahead of time also really helps shave down time. A major lifesaver though is having a stash of pre-made raw during weeks that you don't have the time or energy to prep. Matsu, Tangy, and Choji actually love when I switch it up with pre-made raw grinds anyway. How do you deal with feeling overwhelmed? Question 2. How do you avoid freezer burned meats? Yes, freezer burn does make the meat look a little weird. It also may taste a little off to picky pets. Something that's been a huge help at keeping my meats fresh and vibrant is a vacuum sealer. It does take more time to package everything up, but when I have a lot of meat that I need to separate and store for later, it's a big help. Matsu's actually scared of the vacuum sealer, but little does he know it's keeping his meat fresh. A few other things that I try to keep in mind when freezing raw meats is to try not to open and shut the freezer door too often, and to make sure that meats aren't in there for too long. Feeding freezer burnt meat is safe though, as long as it doesn't smell rotten. Question 3. Is it safe to grind your own whole prey? Other people I've asked are worried about bacteria and the digestive tract. Grinding can be a great way to get a pet interested in whole prey. So if you have the right machine to grind a whole prey animal efficiently, go for it. I do suggest removing the fur and feathers just to make sure it doesn't jam your grinder though. And yes, I also suggest removing the GI tract. This is mainly due to the intestines being full of fecal matter, which does have the potential to make your pet sick. I usually have to remove the GI tract in larger whole prey animals that I feed Choji. If I don't, he'll completely ignore it. Such a drama king. Question 4. Would it be okay to feed my dog 1 raw meal a day and 1 kibble meal a day? Recently, I've had a lot of dog and cat owners ask me about feeding half raw, half kibble, and if it's actually safe. So I wanted to address this as well. Many owners have heard that kibble and raw digest at different rates, and therefore it's dangerous to feed together. Now, kibble and raw do digest at different rates, but does this mean it's dangerous? The concern over feeding kibble and raw together is that kibble will slow down the digestion process, causing the raw meat and bone to stay in the digestive tract longer, and this would increase the risk of pathogens harming them. However, there have been experiments that compared the digestion rates between kibble and raw, and what they found out was that kibble actually digested at a much quicker rate than raw meat and bone did. So what this experiment shows is that kibble won't extend the digestion process, because it actually digests faster than raw meat and bone anyway. So yes, kibble and raw can be fed together. But if the raw portion is above 20% of the total daily intake, you're going to need to make sure that the raw portion is balanced so that your pet can receive the nutrients they need. Question 5. I've encountered some raw feeders that feed bee pollen. Have you tried it, and would you recommend it? Many owners feed raw bee pollen to remedy seasonal allergies, but I'm not fully convinced it works. A few springs ago, I noticed Matsu was a little itchy, so I went to go look for some local raw bee pollen. After my experience with speaking to this beekeeper though, I found myself questioning if it actually worked. First of all, the raw bee pollen has to be local to your area to actually protect the immune system from local allergens. But second of all, even if it is local, this still might not be very effective, and here's why. So I asked this local beekeeper if they sold bee pollen, and I also told him the reason why I wanted it. Instead of just selling it to me, the beekeeper actually talked me out of buying it. He told me that raw bee pollen has an exine outer shell that covers the pollen, and that it's almost completely indigestible by humans and animals. I was actually pretty bummed hearing this. Have you had success when using raw bee pollen for allergies? If not, are there any other meal additions that you add to remedy a problem that your pet has? Let me know in the comments.